Hi, welcome back to Mrs. Thompson's Math Channel, and today we're going to start our fluency chart, looking at the multiples of 0 and 1. And if you can remember what we talked about last time, we're going to roll these multiplication facts out in a strategy-based order. And that means we're going to start with our foundational facts and then build from there. So our first foundational fact that we're going to work on today is 0. And normally I would just jump right in and fill out this chart to show you how we can work on our multiple of 0. But when you're dealing with 0, you can't really draw an array because anything times 0 equals 0. So here's our first activity that we usually do. Our first activity that we usually do is we look at this skip counting card and we do our 0 times 1, 0 times 2, 0 times 3, 0 times 4. But guess what we would have if we filled this out? We'd have 0 times 0 is 0. 0 times 1 is 0. 0 times 2 is 0. 0 times 3 is 0, and so on. So there's really nothing to fill out on this card. So we can just jump straight to our strategy, and our strategy on 0 is any number times 0 equals 0. And if you wanted to make it look really fancy, like you're doing some fancy algebra, it would look a little something like this. Any number times 0 equals 0. Easy enough, right? Or if we wanted to put in there our commutative property, which we can go over when we do our multiples of 1, 0 times any number equals 0. Doesn't matter how the factors are switched, the product will be equal the same in the commutative property. So I'll give you an example of that really quick. So if we pick 12 times 0, guess what it equals? 0. And 0 times 12 equals 0. Okay, easy enough. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our multiples of 1. Those ones we can kind of go through the chart. So the first thing that I do on our chart is I work on building an array times 1. And I start off with a multiplication equation. So the multiplication equation I'm going to use this time is I'm just going to do 1 times, let's do 1 times 8. Okay, so I'm going to draw an array. An array is a visual representation of that equation. So if I'm doing 1 times 8, I'm going to draw an array of one group of 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is a visual representation of one group of 8. So what I did was I circled, or I boxed in one group of 8. This is in a column. You could also do one group of 8 in a row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Same thing, one group of 8. This is one group of 8. This is 8 groups of 1. Check that out. Okay, so I kind of gave you a little hint of how we're going to fill this out. So this visual representation, this array says one group of 8 equals 8. Okay? That would look something like this array. Here's one group of 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 equals 8. 8 groups of 1 equals 8. So this time we're going to have 8 groups. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And how many are going to be in each group? 1. And I can even draw the number 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Now if we were going to look at this thing called the commutative property, the commutative property states that we can move those numbers and it equals the same product. We can move those factors and it equals the same product. So the way I explained that to you guys in class was I was talking about how people often commute to get to work, or you commute to get to school. You might load up onto a bus and commute to school, and then you commute home after school. So the same idea is that when you move the factors, the product equals the same. So our first multiplication equation would be 1 times 8, one group of 8, equals 8. Okay? If I switch these factors, if I commute these numbers, 8 groups of 1 equals 8. All right? Doesn't matter which order the factors are in, the product will be the same. We talked about this a little bit in class last year too, about the inverse operation. The inverse is when you look at that multiplication equation and you go in reverse to find the division fact. So the inverse operation of multiplication is division. So that's what we're going to do on this one. We're going to go in reverse and find the division problem. Okay? So we're going to start with 8, and if we divide it into a group of 8, how many is going to be in each group? 1. Look at that. If I take 8 and I divide it into 8 groups, there's going to be 1 in each group. What if I say, so look at how we went in reverse to find the division problem. Now we're going to go in reverse to find the division problem for this one. So if I start off with 8, and if I divide it into groups of 1, it equals how many groups? Or how many are going to be in the group is what I meant to say. Sorry about that. So right up here is that example. So we have 8 in one group, and there's 8 in that group. Okay? So let's practice a little skip counting. This thing is called a T-chart, and this is something that you'll really use in 4th and 5th grade. If you probably have seen it if you're in 4th or 5th grade right now. But basically, you put on here whatever multiple you're working on. In this case, we're working on 1, and you multiply this side times the 1 to get the list of products here, or the skip counting, the T-chart. So 0 times 1 equals 0. 1 times 1 equals 1. 2 times 1 equals 2. 3 times 1 equals 3. 4 times 1 equals 4. 5 times 1 equals 5. 6 times 1 equals 6. 7 times 1 equals 7. 8 times 1 equals 8. 9 times 1 equals 9. 10 times 1 equals 10. 11 times 1 equals 11. And 12 times 1 equals 12. 12 times 1 equals 12. So here's our T-chart. Now, what I usually do is I say, okay, everybody think about any patterns or any strategies that you use to multiply times 1. And that's when we take a pause and we think, and then we usually pair up with a neighbor and we share what strategy or what pattern we see. And that's when we write down our strategy over here. So what are our strategy for times 1? Well, since we can't do that in school right now, we're just going to take a quick look at this T-chart. There are some things that I notice. I'm sure there are some things that you notice as well. Well, any number times 1 is equaling that number. Do you guys see that? So that's what my strategy is going to be for multiplying times 1. Any number times 1 equals that same number. We could also use the commutative property to show the opposite of that. So we could say 1 times any number equals that number. And if we want to do an example of each of those, we're going to go ahead and do that. That's what we normally do in class, right? So we could say 8 times 1 equals 8. Or 1 times 8 equals 8. And this is a time for you just to think about all the different numbers you could multiply times 1 and practice it. So, for example, I could say 223 times 1 equals 223. Or 1 times 223 equals 223. Okay? So that's going to be our strategy for times 1. We can look at this skip counting card just to kind of refresh our memory about how these things work. All right, the outside is the multiple that we're working on. The inside is the skip counting. These are called skip counting cards. So we can say to ourselves, 1 times 1 equals 1. 1 times 2 equals 2. 1 times 3 equals 3. 1 times 4 equals 4. 1 times 5 equals 5. 1 times 6 equals 6. 1 times 7 equals 7. 1 times 8 equals 8. 1 times 9 equals 9. 1 times 10 equals 10. 1 times 11 equals 11, and 1 times 12 equals 12. All right, so we've gone over our multiples of 0 today, and, which is kind of a boring card, right? Because it's just zeros and zeros and zeros, and our multiples of 1. All right, good way to practice is just practice your counting. Counting by 1, up and down. You can start here and move this way, or you can start here and move this way. All right? Good job, you guys. And we'll see you next time.